Well, hello everyone. We're here with our Live with the Mayor segment. Today we have as our guest newly elected Senator, State Senator Dan McCay. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
All of Riverton. Hello.
Again, we always like to say these segments really started because of you, the public, wanted to have more of our community and business leaders come in and have a conversation about some of the things that might impact them. So
Yeah.
So we've started. We've had a few of these now, and they've been pretty well received. Wanted to just have you maybe take a moment or two and
So they've been pretty well received. So you wanted to have me so that you could at least have a low show, is what this is, right?
We've got to maintain the bar here.
Okay. All right.
Dan. But for those that don't know you, could you maybe just take a minute and explain who you are? Who's Dan McCay?
Let's see. I live here in Riverton, longtime resident, and I'm married to probably the most successful city councilwoman ever in the city of Riverton, and I have 6 children. They range in age from 17 down to 4 years old, and they keep us hopping for sure. One little known fact that most people don't know, I might as well out it now, but my wife is also my stepsister. The reaction is as I would expect, but my dad married Tawny's mom after both of the alternating parents passed away, and that was after we'd been married for 10 years. So at the end of the day, that's one little weird thing about us. It sure makes celebrating Christmas interesting. Let's see. I was elected to the Utah House of Representatives back in 2012, and I've served in the House of Representatives, served Riverton and Bluffdale, a little part of Harriman, for since 2012. So I guess we're on. It's actually 7 years because I was a midterm appointee. And then just this last year, I was elected to serve in the Utah State Senate, and looking forward to the changes that come from working in the Senate. It's a different body altogether, totally different feeling, and I'm adjusting.
I've noticed that you've got 75 in the House, you've got 29 senators. It is maybe a little more collegial, I guess, if you could say. It's a little tighter knit.
Tighter knit. The House is interesting, right? And with 75 people, it's a battle of ideas, right? And every floor time can turn into a Shark Tank at any minute. In a lot of ways, you're separated on the floor, and I mean, there's some colleagues where you can live in this small room that is the House of Representatives with 75 representatives, but if you don't go out of your way, you might not talk to them, but a couple times during the session, right? And so it's easier, it's less cohesive, I guess, in that way. There's more a battle for ideas. In the Senate, on the other hand, it's much smaller group. There are 29, which is half the body. The room is much smaller, and you're working with your colleagues on just about every issue, and in a lot of ways, I think it will be interesting to see that dynamic change, because I'm used to, in my heart, I'm still a House member, where I feel like I've got to go fight for my issue, and some of these guys are like, oh, sure, that's great. We'll help you out. It really is an interesting dynamic.
Well, that's great, and congratulations again on
thanks.
your election here as representing us. And the Senate district encompasses Riverton, Bluffdale, Draper. Is that right?
I've got if you look at so I've got Lehigh, the north side of Lehigh. I've got Draper. I've got Sandy. I've got South Jordan. I've got Riverton. I've got Harriman. And I've got Bluffdale. So it's a pretty big Senate seat. I mean, redistricting will be in a few years from now, and I anticipate the seat will be divided a little bit differently, just because we've had so much growth in population in the south end of this valley.
Well, let's talk about that. Legislative session is coming up here starting on Monday. It's a 45-day marathon. The last couple of weeks, I know, are really kind of nuts, but with it beginning here on Monday, I know you've got a couple of bills that you're sponsoring. You talked about them at your town hall the other night. maybe you could talk about some of the things that you're sponsoring and then
Yeah.
what you see going on here in the session.
Well, I think this session is going to be, there are going to be a lot of focuses, right? One is we have a lot of initiatives that either passed or didn't pass this last legislative session. And there's going to be a question of what do we still do with those policy issues, right? And, medical marijuana was a big issue that was on the ballot, and it passed, and then the legislature got together and I voted for it. Interestingly, medical marijuana did not pass in Riverton, Bluffdale, Harriman area. I was a little bit surprised by that. That being said, when the speaker came up with a compromise and said, well, this will be a much more conservative step forward into medical marijuana, I felt like it would be interesting It's interesting as a representative, most of the time you're sitting up there with a yes button and a no button. There's really no maybe. And you're sitting up there and you're trying to make decisions about policy. And when you're trying to make these decisions, you rarely have direct data on how you should vote. The medical marijuana was an exception for me, because at the end of when the ballot passed or failed, wherever it was, I looked at the data here in my House district and saw that it had failed, and I knew exactly how my constituents felt about a specific issue, which is really rare. And I wish like anything you could know that more frequently, but you don't. So the initiatives, medical marijuana, there'll be some issues surrounding medical marijuana, I'm sure, this year. What to do about Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion also failed in the Riverton, Bluffdale, Harriman area, and it narrowly passed over in Draper and failed in Lehigh. So it's kind of an interesting, if I look at the Senate district, it failed across. But in that bill, you probably didn't know because it was hidden way down in the language, but there was a tax increase to help cover the costs of the expanded version of Medicaid. And so even though it generates tax revenue, it's not revenue neutral. In other words, the tax increase won't cover the cost of Medicaid expansion. So as a legislature, we're trying to figure out, can we put some bumpers around it from cost? Oregon, a more liberal state obviously than Utah, was granted a waiver from the Obama administration that gave them caps that they could put on their Medicaid program. So I think you're going to see us try and put caps on enrollment and some of those other things to try and scope and control it from a budgetary standpoint. And then, there are some other issues that people are trying to understand from Medicaid. And then there's one other thing. Oh, and then the redistricting issue also failed in Riverton and Bluffdale, and in this district. That was Prop 4 on the ballot. Has also failed out here. That said, it did pass statewide narrowly, and a few hundred votes. And so the question is, how and what should we do with that, and where it should be. The crazy thing about that initiative, and again, it failed here, but if you really look at it, the sponsors were talking about how it'd be the end of gerrymandering. But if you don't know what gerrymandering is, there are plenty of online resources, but the press uses it so frequently, I guess it's easy. But they thought it'd be the end of gerrymandering, but it says that gerrymandering you have to take into consideration partisan symmetry. That language is in the bill. Which in other states has meant if a statewide election were to be held, and we can look at the most recent one, Mitt Romney got, well over 70, I think 70% is the final, somewhere in there. So if Mitt Romney got 70% and the Democratic candidate statewide got 30%, well, what that means is on a statewide basis, 70% of our congressional representation should be Republican and 30% should be Democrat. And you have to draw a seat that would match, that kind of requirement, which, in my opinion, and others as well, that's just doubling down on gerrymandering.
Sure.
So
maybe some unintended consequences that come as a result of some of these propositions. So
yeah, and I get it. In a town hall, one constituent mentioned how I talked about how an initiative is a blunt instrument. Well, once you file it, you can go out there, have all the public policy conversations, and there's no way to amend it once it's out there. You could find problems in your bill, right. No way to amend it. And I said, well, it's a blunt instrument. And a constituent responded, and I thought this was very true. It's a blunt instrument for the citizens to hit the legislature upside the head as well.
That's right.
And I thought, that's pretty fair, but nobody expects that the initiative will go untouched, unamended. I think in concept, Medicaid expansion needs to be protected. The citizens have spoken, and I think that needs to be there. And something needs to be done about redistricting so that we don't double down on gerrymandering and kind of that thing. But the other thing I think that will be important in this legislative session is taxes.
Right.
And I'm not going to go into lengthy tax conversation here on a Facebook Live post because we value both viewers that are watching.
Well, the majority of viewers end up watching, I know. Not during the live second, but we've had hundreds. Take a look at the Me Love and the Ben McAdams segment, Dan.
Those are cool people.
We had thousands of people. Well,
Trent, those are cool people.
We only invite cool people on
People
the show.
want to talk to them.
We only invite cool people on the show. But speaking of taxation, some of the issues that then you think might really impact Riverton, because that's it's what we want our constituents to hear about during the legislative session. I know there's some talk about some of the housing affordability issues, metering of secondary water, and the sales tax. Governor Herbert's talked about trying to broaden that because a lot of services are not assessed any sales taxes. And now they want to possibly assess that to services like they do retail.
Yeah.
That obviously would be a noticeable impact to some of our residents. Anything else that you can see or foresee that might be here in the session that would impact us?
Well, you've just named off like 4 controversial issues that will be a long slog and fought out consistently. The one you didn't mention is the other one I think that is probably of interest to us in the southwest part of the valley specifically, which is what are we going to do about long-term growth patterns in the state of Utah, and how are we going to manage it so that our transportation needs match our housing needs, and at the same time those two going hand in hand so that we continue to grow our economy and not get kind of stuck into a rut for our economy. And Utah's economy has performed extremely well through the downturn and through the upturn, and a lot of people and again, probably the 6th thing we could talk about that will be very interesting to deal with will be the state has a lot of money.
1.3 billion surplus.
The last time we had this kind of money, we put this money into one-time projects to prevent from creating new dependencies for government services, and I think you'll see something similar this year.
Well, I know that a lot of residents here, as I'm sure you do know, that the transportation issue is a big issue.
Yeah.
And it's one that Southwest mayors have started getting together on a monthly basis after the Olympia Hills issue, and the infrastructure is what is really, really important that we've got to get done here. I was taking a look at some of the dollars that have been spent in all of the county over the last 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me that this southwest quadrant has not seen more. Proportionately, we're not even in line with what our population is. And those are some of the things that we want to, as a Southwest Mayors Group, I know, during the session, we'll have opportunities to talk. And
well, Salt Lake County controls a lot of that money. I mean, and how it gets allocated, we have gas tax, and how the gas tax gets assigned, by population, but there's also contribution. There's also things where some of it gets funneled off in the county resources. And I just look at that, and I question all the time whether or not Salt Lake County is meeting the needs of the entire county. And I think that's been an overarching frustration throughout the time that I've been in the legislature and I've watched Salt Lake County. Is I scratch my head every once in a while when I see the things that are going on around the county and the things that aren't going on around this part of the valley. And I don't know. People ought to be asking themselves, are we getting what we need out of the county? And is this fulfilling our long-term objectives? I don't know the answer to that. But I think those are questions that are starting to be asked, and they're starting to be asked by the right people.
Well,
how's that for another inflammatory topic?
We would not have the time to discuss here.
We have literally listed off 5 to 10 things that could absorb an entire legislative session, And yet we will still find a way to pass a record number of bills. I'm certain of it. Every year the Tribune likes to make this big issue out of how many number of bills, and it's a record. And all I'm going to tell you is technology is aiding us in every part of our life. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, it is also influencing the legislature and making us move faster and more efficiently. I mean, you imagine the old days, they had to write it out, write out the bill by hand.
Sure.
And comparing us to that, I just, think is somewhat ridiculous. But I think there will be, and it will be like this year, just like it has been every year before. There will be 10 to 15 bills that matter.
That dominate the...
And the rest of it is something that leadership does to keep us busy while they work on a budget.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Like you said, there are those half a dozen topics we just addressed could go on for quite some time. We are going to be meeting Mondays as a Southwest Mayor's Caucus with the legislative body, the representatives, the state senators and representatives from this area. So
I said you were bringing donuts. That's what
we are.
There's,
that's how we hear. That's the weakness.
If there's sugar, people show up.
Okay.
Because we need it constantly. So I will say, so everybody listening, my mobile phone is 801-810-4110. Again, 801-810-4110. Feel free to reach out. Give me a call. If you want to go to the state's legislative website, you can go and find my state legislative page on le.utah.gov. And the legislative page has a lot of information there that you certainly can enjoy. So I just want to make sure people knew how to get a hold of me if there was an issue.
Absolutely. We wanted to make sure that everybody heard that and knows exactly how to reach out if there are questions, comments. So thank you. Appreciate that. State Senator Dan McCay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great session.